She did everything right. She had gone to the police station, had reported being stalked by her ex-boyfriend, had believed the law would stand on her side, but exactly 30 days later, Jasmeen Kaur was buried alive in a hole in the ground in a remote part of the South Australian outback, while still fully conscious, in a place where no one could hear her or reach her in time. And within that absolute isolation, a truth even more painful than her death would slowly come to light. The person behind it all was not some stranger stepping out of the shadows, but the very man she had once loved and trusted. And what makes this story even more haunting is that the whole cruel plan had been carefully prepared, step by step, during the very time she believed she was protected. In early March 2021, in the city of Adelaide, South Australia, Jasmeen Kaur, 21, did not return home after a shift at an aged care facility, where she was studying and working part-time in nursing. Her family and friends quickly realized something was wrong, as every attempt to reach her went unanswered. A missing person report was filed with South Australia Police shortly after. For Jasmeen's loved ones, this was the beginning of a nightmare none of them could have imagined the true horror of. In those first hours, the family still held on to a faint hope that perhaps she had simply run into some unplanned trouble, or was with a friend and hadn't had the chance to let anyone know. But as time passed with no word from her, worry slowly turned into real fear, especially as they recalled what she had shared about a relationship that had ended not long before. As soon as the report came in, South Australia Police launched an urgent investigation into the disappearance. One detail that immediately caught investigators' attention was that, only about a month earlier, Jasmeen herself had gone to the police station to report being stalked and harassed by her ex-boyfriend, Tarikjot Singh. Singh had already received a formal police warning, though the relationship between the two had ended not long before. With that information, police quickly identified this as their top line of inquiry, and Singh became the first person brought in for questioning. At the same time, investigators began gathering footage from security cameras around the area where Jasmeen worked, while also going back over her last recorded movements before she disappeared. Every hour that passed during this stage carried enormous weight, as investigators understood that in cases involving violence from someone close to the victim, time is always the deciding factor between life and death. Officers on the case also quickly reached out to Jasmeen's colleagues and close friends to gather more information about recent developments in her life, particularly anything connected to the relationship that had ended. Just one day after Jasmeen was reported missing, Singh was brought into the police station for questioning for the first time. During that interview, when asked about the last time he had seen Jasmeen, Singh said he could not recall exactly when it was. Singh insisted that on the night Jasmeen disappeared, he had been at home and had not gone out at all. However, it was not long before investigators found that Singh's account did not match up with what had actually happened. Mounting pressure from the investigation forced Singh to face increasingly specific and pointed questions. Investigators cross-checked Singh's statements against phone location data, security camera footage, and accounts from people around him, and quickly found a number of inconsistencies between these sources. Singh's initial composure began to crack, as each further answer raised more questions than it resolved. The atmosphere in the interview room grew increasingly tense, as both sides came to realize the truth was only a matter of time away from coming out. Just one day after that first interview, Singh completely changed his account. This time, he told police that Jasmeen had taken her own life, and that he himself had buried her body in an area within the Flinders Ranges, hundreds of kilometers from Adelaide. Singh then agreed to lead police to the exact location he had described. For the investigators present on that fateful drive, it was a moment of extreme tension, as no one knew for certain what was truly waiting ahead. The journey from Adelaide to the Flinders Ranges took several hours, passing along quiet roads that grew more remote the deeper they went into the ranges. Throughout that drive, the mood inside the police vehicle was so heavy that almost no one spoke, each person carrying a sense of what they were about to witness. The account Singh had first given, that the victim had taken her own life, had left investigators deeply skeptical from the start, as it did not match anything they had gathered during the earlier days of the investigation. Near Morillana Creek, close to the town of Hawker, in the Flinders Ranges, police found a shallow grave, hastily dug into the dry ground of the remote ranges. Jasmeen's body was found there, confirming her family's worst fears. Alongside the body, police also found cable ties that had been used to restrain her. The scene, set within a barren and eerily silent stretch of land, left a lasting mark on the officers present that day, some of whom later admitted it was one of the most haunting scenes they had encountered in their careers. A forensic team was deployed shortly after, carrying out a thorough examination to determine the exact cause and time of death. The entire area around the grave was cordoned off and carefully searched in order to gather any further trace that could strengthen the investigation going forward. For many of the officers present that day, the absolute stillness of that barren land only added to the weight of the moment, as they understood this was the final place where a young life had come to such an unjust end. As soon as the body was confirmed and the initial evidence was secured, Tarikjot Singh was formally arrested and charged with murder. Singh was taken into custody for further questioning to establish the full sequence of events. For Jasmeen's family, the speed of the arrest gave them answers sooner than in many other cases, but nothing could ease the pain of their loss. News of the arrest quickly spread through the local community, leaving many stunned to learn that the person behind the tragedy was someone who had once been close to the victim, rather than a stranger. From this point, the case formally moved into a new stage, where the focus shifted from uncovering the truth to proving it fully and convincingly before the law. Jasmeen Kaur, 21, was a student studying nursing, while also working part-time at an aged care facility in Adelaide's western suburbs. To her friends and colleagues, she was a hard-working, dedicated young woman, devoted to caring for the elderly, who held on to a long-term dream of building a career in healthcare. Jasmeen's family, who had built a life together with her in South Australia, always gave her love and took pride in her constant efforts in her studies and career. None of them could have imagined that her ended relationship concealed a danger so great. Those who had worked alongside Jasmeen at the aged care facility remembered her as someone who always wore a smile, who patiently listened to the elderly residents in her care, and who showed a dedication that went well beyond what her job required. To her family, she was a source of emotional strength, a hope for a better future. After years the whole family had spent building a new life in an unfamiliar land. Jasmeen and Singh had once been in a relationship, which came to an end in early 2021. After the breakup, rather than accepting it and moving on, Singh repeatedly tried to contact Jasmeen again, pressuring her in various ways, including threats to harm himself if she did not respond. Feeling unsafe as this behavior escalated, Jasmeen decided to go to the authorities to report that she was being stalked and harassed. Police received the report and issued a formal warning to Singh, only about a month before the tragedy occurred. This is one of the most troubling details of the entire case, as it shows the victim had actively sought protection, had done exactly what is recommended in such situations, yet the tragedy could still not be prevented. In the time between the report and the day of the tragedy, Singh continued to reach out, sending numerous messages filled with resentment and bitterness, although most of them were never actually sent to Jasmeen. Those messages, when later discovered, revealed an escalating state of mind, moving from initial hurt into a resentful determination aimed directly at the person who had rejected him. For those who work in family violence victim support, this stands as clear evidence that the gap between a formal warning and an extreme act is sometimes far smaller than people assume. In the months before the tragedy, Jasmeen had shared with a few close friends how unsettled she felt each time she received a message from her ex-boyfriend, though she herself kept trying to stay strong and carry on with daily life. No one around Jasmeen, not even Jasmeen herself, could have foreseen that behind those resentful messages lay a plan that was being nurtured quietly and systematically to such a degree. The very report Jasmeen had made, which seemed at the time to be the right and necessary step, later became one of the most haunting details raised by prosecutors in court, who stressed that it showed Jasmeen was fully aware of the danger closing in, yet was still unable to protect herself from a plan that had been so carefully calculated. Tarikjot Singh, then just 20, was an international student from India, studying information technology at a university in Adelaide, while also working as a disability support carer. According to what was later presented in court, Singh was unable to accept the end of the relationship and sank increasingly into feelings of rejection and wounded pride. The prosecution argued that everything Singh did afterwards did not stem from a momentary impulse, but was the result of a deliberate process of calculation, aimed at punishing Jasmeen for leaving him and for going to the police. On the defense side, it was argued that Singh's judgment had been severely impaired following the emotional shock, and that he himself experienced mental health difficulties in the period that followed. However, what was revealed about the meticulous preparation before the crime told an entirely different story. Before the tragedy, Singh had been seen by those around him as a mild-mannered student who kept a low profile, with no prior criminal record. Because of this, as the truth gradually came out in court, many who knew Singh expressed utter shock, as the image of someone capable of planning something so meticulous and so brutal stood in complete contrast to everything they had known of him before. This contrast made the case all the more troubling to reflect on, as it showed that sometimes the most dangerous warning signs do not show on the surface at all, but exist quietly behind an entirely ordinary appearance. Singh's classmates and housemates later expressed complete bewilderment, as none of them had ever noticed any sign of instability in Singh throughout the time they had known him. Before the day of the attack, Singh downloaded a map showing the locations of public security cameras across the city of Adelaide. On the afternoon before carrying out the act, Singh went to a hardware store and bought gloves, cable ties, and a shovel, items that would later become key evidence in the case. That night, Singh swapped his car with a housemate's car and also asked that housemate to cover his work shift for him, in order to create a false alibi. Beyond that, Singh removed the SIM card from his own phone, placed it in another phone, and left it at home, so that location data would show he had remained at home the whole time the events took place. Each small action within this chain of preparation, when pieced together, painted a picture of a plan calculated well in advance, not a spur-of-the-moment act. Prosecutors later emphasized that the time between planning and carrying out the act gave Singh many chances to stop, to reconsider, to abandon his intention. But at every one of those turning points, Singh chose to keep moving forward, perfecting every last detail of his plan with a disturbing clarity of mind. This, more than any other factor, was repeatedly highlighted by prosecutors as a key point in their argument before the court. The careful study of security camera locations across the city also showed that Singh had planned his travel routes in advance to minimize the chance of being filmed, a level of preparation far beyond what is typically seen in an impulsive crime. On that fateful day, Singh turned up at Jasmeen's workplace in Adelaide's western suburbs. Jasmeen was taken from her workplace with no chance to prepare or defend herself in any way. She was bound with cable ties and tape, then put into the car, beginning a journey of several hours towards the Flinders Ranges, hundreds of kilometers from the city. Throughout that journey, Jasmeen had no opportunity whatsoever to call for help or to escape. On arrival, Singh had already dug a hole in a remote area near Moralana Creek. Jasmeen, still conscious at the time, was placed into that hole and buried. This is one of the most painful and haunting details of the entire case, an act that anyone hearing about it would find almost impossible to comprehend the cruelty of. No sound could reach the nearest homes in that area, and no one was present to notice what was happening in that remote place. Once it was done, Singh left the scene and returned to Adelaide, carrying on with daily life as though nothing had happened. The entire journey, from beginning to end, was carried out with a chilling level of preparation, with not a single small detail overlooked. The remote landscape of the Flinders Ranges, known for its rugged natural beauty and stillness, became the site of one of the most brutal acts the South Australian community has ever had to confront. There was no sign of remorse or hesitation at any point throughout, something prosecutors later stressed repeatedly in their arguments before the court. The geographical distance between where Jasmeen was taken and where she was buried was also a detail prosecutors particularly emphasized, since that hours-long journey led to a single, isolated location Singh believed no one would ever find. On the way back, Singh discarded Jasmeen's shoes, glasses, and work ID into a bin near the burial site, along with the leftover cable ties. Singh also kept completely silent in the days that followed, showing no unusual signs to those around him. That unsettling composure, which lasted right up until his first police interview, showed a coldness far beyond what people typically imagine of someone who has committed a crime in a moment of losing control. Those items, hastily discarded in what seemed like a careful attempt to erase all trace, ultimately became one of the key pieces that helped police confirm with greater certainty what had truly happened. Before the case went to trial, the prosecution team assembled a tight body of evidence, including security camera footage of the equipment purchases, data showing the false alibi, along with physical evidence recovered from the burial site. Alongside this, messages Singh had drafted, but never sent to Jasmeen in the days before the attack, were also presented in court, clearly showing his resentful state of mind at the time. All these pieces, when placed together, formed a comprehensive and almost irrefutable picture of a deliberate act from beginning to end. The prosecution also detailed exactly how Singh had faked his alibi, from swapping vehicles to deliberately leaving his phone at home to mislead location data. Each layer of evidence presented further reinforced the argument that this was a carefully calculated crime, not the result of a sudden loss of control, as the defense had tried to argue. Forensic experts also contributed their findings on the time of death and the traces recovered at the scene, helping complete the overall picture the prosecution had worked hard to build throughout its preparation of the case. The entire body of evidence, from digital data to physical exhibits, formed a solid foundation that left the defense very little room to mount a challenge from the earliest stages of trial preparation. Initially, Singh did not plead guilty to the murder charge. However, about a month before the trial was due to formally begin at the Supreme Court of South Australia in early 2023, Singh unexpectedly changed his plea and formally pleaded guilty. This decision spared Jasmeen's family from a lengthy trial with painful details laid out in full in public, but it could not erase what they had already endured through 2 years of waiting for justice. Throughout that time, Jasmeen's family had to live with the pain of their loss, while patiently following every step of the legal process, a journey none of them had ever wanted to go through. In preparing for sentencing, psychologists were also consulted to assess Singh's state of mind at the time of the offense, but most professional opinion found no strong evidence to suggest Singh had entirely lost the capacity to understand his actions. This further reinforced the prosecution's position that, however deep the emotional pain he experienced, Singh remained fully aware of the seriousness of every decision he made throughout the planning and carrying out of the crime. In August 2023, the presiding judge handed down a mandatory life sentence to Tarikjot Singh, in line with South Australian law for the offence of murder. As for the non-parole period, it was set at 22 years and 10 months, only slightly above the statutory minimum of 20 years. In delivering the sentence, the judge described it as an act of extreme cruelty, and admitted it was difficult to find words that could fully capture the terror Jasmeen must have experienced in the final moments of her life. For Jasmeen's family, it was a moment of both relief that justice had been done, and pain in realizing they were now beginning a sentence of their own, one of permanent absence of a loved one for the rest of their lives. Jasmeen's mother, present at the hearing that day, shared that she still kept the habit of talking to her daughter every night before bed, even knowing those words would never be answered again. That loss, she said, would forever remain an inseparable part of her family's life, no matter how severe the sentence handed down to the person responsible. The story seemed to have come to a close after the first sentencing, but prosecutors in South Australia argued the non-parole period handed down was not adequate given the severity of the offence. The prosecution decided to appeal to the Court of Criminal Appeal, arguing the non-parole period needed to be extended further to properly reflect the brutal and deliberate nature of the crime. In June 2024, the Court of Appeal upheld the appeal, deciding to increase the non-parole period to 28 years and 6 months. This means Singh will not be eligible to apply for parole until 2049, by which time he will be 49 years old. This is a rare development within the justice system, showing that justice can sometimes be recalibrated to more accurately reflect the true seriousness of a crime, even if it takes extra time to get there. Once his sentence is served, Singh, an Indian citizen who came to Australia as an international student, is likely to be deported from the country. The Court of Appeal's decision to increase the sentence was seen by many in the community as a positive sign, showing the justice system is still capable of correcting itself when an initial sentence does not fully reflect the true seriousness of an offence. However, for Jasmeen's family, the appeal process, which added almost another year, also meant continuing to live in a state of waiting, continuing to face painful memories each time the case was brought up again in the media. What makes this case especially painful is not just the cruelty of how it was carried out, but the fact that the victim had actively sought protection before the tragedy occurred. This raises a major question about how effective existing warning and protection measures truly are when facing someone who had already intended to carry out an extreme act. Perhaps this is also a reminder that the gap between a warning that exists on paper and protection that is truly effective can still be a very wide one that needs to be closed. Another point worth reflecting on is how a plan this cruel could be prepared so quietly, while the person carrying it out appeared entirely normal to those around him. This opens up an important perspective that communities and those close to someone need to pay more attention to signs of psychological distress in a person who has just been through a relationship breakdown, rather than simply viewing it as a passing period of sadness. What do you think about the fact that the first sentence was seen as inadequate and only became proportionate after going through an appeal? It is also worth sharing your thoughts on what more needs to be done so that reports of violence within relationships are taken seriously and acted on in time. Please share your perspective in the comments below. This case leaves behind a cold and troubling lesson about the fragile gap between a warning given at the right time and a tragedy that could not be prevented. Jasmeen did everything that is recommended, went to the authorities when she felt unsafe, did not suffer in silence alone. But sometimes, even the most correct steps are not enough to stop someone determined to carry out a plan calculated so carefully in advance. The story is also a cold reminder of the danger that can lie in not accepting the end of a relationship, when a feeling of rejection, if not properly processed and resolved, can quietly grow into something far beyond ordinary hurt. For anyone experiencing being stalked, threatened, or pressured by someone from an ended relationship, seeking support from those around them and from the relevant authorities always remains a necessary step, even when the outcome is not always what one hopes for. In the end, Jasmeen Kaur's story will continue to stand as a profound warning that behind what may seem like an ordinary broken relationship, a danger can sometimes lie hidden that no one could have foreseen the true severity of. The case also leaves a bigger question for society as a whole, about what more needs to be done to make sure formal warnings from the authorities truly become an effective safeguard, rather than remaining a mere formality. For anyone feeling unsafe because of stalking or threats from someone they were once close to, actively speaking up to loved ones, friends, and professional support remains essential, even when the outcome is not always as complete as one hopes. The memory of Jasmeen Kaur, a young woman devoted to her nursing career, who spoke up when she felt unsafe, will remain a quiet but lasting reminder of the value of not suffering alone through any form of threat in life. For those around someone who has just been through a relationship breakdown, timely care and listening can sometimes make a far greater difference than people realize, since warning signs are not always clear enough for a victim to recognize and protect themselves alone. Jasmeen's tragedy, painful and troubling as it is, has also helped drive more serious conversations within the community about how to recognize and respond earlier to stalking and obsessive behavior arising from ended relationships. And above all, this story reminds us that the value of a human life is something that can never be measured or made up for, and that every effort society makes to prevent similar tragedies, however small, is worth pursuing to the very end. The name Jasmeen Kaur, forever tied to this case, is now more than just a name in a court file, but a lasting reminder of the value of speaking up in time, and of the whole community's responsibility to never let a cry for help go unheard in silence. If you or someone you know is experiencing stalking, threats, or violence within a relationship, please don't face it alone. In Australia, you can contact the following support lines for timely help. In an emergency requiring immediate assistance, call 000 000. The Women's Crisis Line on 1-1800 811 811. The National 1800 Respect Line for domestic and sexual violence on 1-1800 737 732. The Men's Referral Service on 1300 766 491. Kids Helpline for children and young people, available 24 hours a day on 1800 55 1800. Lifeline for crisis support and suicide prevention on 1311 114. Reaching out for help is not a sign of weakness, but a brave and necessary step to protect yourself. This content is based on real events made public through news reports and court records for the purposes of information and to raise community awareness.